So in this lesson, we're going to take a look at the angles that you learned about in the previous lesson, and we're going to talk about how they might be congruent to each other or supplementary. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is the first postulate in this lesson, and it's talking about corresponding angles. And from the other day, you knew that when you talked about corresponding angles are the angles that make the letter F. So when I'm working with the angles here, let's talk about like angle 1 and angle 3. That's a pair of corresponding angles. And it says, if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, so I've got two lines that are parallel, P and Q were given to me as parallel, then we know that the pair of corresponding angles that are formed are indeed congruent. So one pair of corresponding angles would be 1 and 3, and we then know that they are congruent. Well, what if we take a look at another pair of corresponding angles? Say 2 and 4. 2 and 4 also make the letter F. And if we know that P and Q are parallel to each other, then we would know that angle 2 and angle 4 are also congruent. So what do you need to get out of this theorem? Well, basically it's just a shortcut statement that says if parallel, basically we're talking about parallel lines, if parallel, then you know that corresponding angles are congruent. So that's the shortcut method. There we go. And what we do is we might utilize this in a proof later on, so that's why we kind of cover it. But just so long as you know, if you've got parallel lines, corresponding angles are congruent. So the F's are congruent. So how does this play a role then with the other types of angles that we talked about before? So if I'm working with two parallel lines and they're cut by a transversal, then we also know that each pair of alternate interior angles are congruent. So if lines are parallel, then alternate interior angles are congruent. Alternate interior are congruent. They also say then, let's skip down to theorem 3.3 for a second. They say that alternate exterior angles are congruent. So we've got corresponding angles would be congruent if lines are parallel. We've got alternate interior and alternate exterior angles are all congruent. The one oddball here is the theorem 3.2, and it says if two lines are parallel, then each pair of same side C's are supplementary. Those are the same side consecutive angles. So same side C's are supplementary. That's the one that's the oddball out. So same side C's are supplementary. So you got to remember that. Corresponding alternate interior and alternate exterior angles are congruent if my lines are parallel, but same side C's are going to be supplementary. Last theorem on this page says in a plane, if a line is perpendicular to one of two parallel lines, then it has to be perpendicular to the other. So let's go ahead and draw two parallel lines. If I've got two parallel lines, here's line 1, here's line 2. If those two lines are parallel, and I've got a line that is perpendicular to one of those two lines, then that line also has to be perpendicular to the other one. So basically I'm saying this. Here's line A, we'll say this is line B, and this is line C. So if I know that A is parallel to B, and I know that line A and C are perpendicular, this then means, therefore, we should say that C has to be perpendicular to B. So if a line is perpendicular to one of two parallel lines, then it has to be perpendicular to the other. So now we're just going to go ahead and run through a couple examples using those theorems. And what they're saying here in this first example is that we're given that the lines are parallel. So we know that line AC and GD are indeed parallel to each other. As soon as we know they're parallel, that means alternate interior, alternate exterior, and corresponding angles are congruent, and same side C's are supplementary. So looking at this information, the first thing we want to do is we want to find out what x is. So I'm looking at this, and I notice that I've got x here, and I've got x here. You can do this a couple different ways. Now, if you want to deal with all the x's at once, you would realize that the two angles that we're working with here, the x minus 3 and the 2x minus 135, form the letter F, so they're corresponding. So if you want to, you could actually take your 2x minus 135 and set it equal to the x minus 30 because corresponding angles are congruent if the lines are parallel. So if we solve this for x, I'm going to go ahead and subtract x from both sides. I'm going to get x minus 135 equals a negative 30, and then we're going to add 135 to the other side, so I get 105. That tells me the x value is 105. Now, if you saw, you could have done it a different way. You could have said, oh, well, this angle and this angle are vertical angles, and from the previous couple chapters we knew that vertical angles are congruent. So you could have taken these two and set them equal to each other and solve, and you still would have gotten the same exact answer for your x. So now that we've got x, we're going to fill in our measurements for our angles, and it says the first one we want to do is angle EDG. So E to D to G would be this angle right here, and since we know that our x was 105, 105 minus my 30 ends up giving me 75. So the angle degree measure there is 75, which means that this angle here should also be the same, and we knew that because of the vertical angles also. But the last thing you have to do is you have to figure out what angle BDG is. Now, angle BDG, B to D to G, is this angle right here. So angle BDG is right next to this angle, and when they're right next to each other and they form a line, they're a linear pair, and linear pairs are supplementary. Therefore, I could say, oh, these two angles should add up to 180 degrees. The other thing you could do is you could say, these two angles, angle ABD and angle BDG, are same side C's, and same side C's should also be supplementary. Doesn't matter what you do, as long as you realize that the angles that you're utilizing have to be supplementary. So if I think about it this way, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to maybe do the same side C's for you. Okay, so same side C's, this angle right here is 75. And we need to figure out what the missing angle here is. So I would do 75 plus, now I'm not going to do an x, we'll go ahead and do a y because I don't know, I can't use the x because it's already been utilized. They are supplementary, so we're going to add them, set it equal 180. So if I subtract, we're going to end up getting 105. Creepy. There we go, that's all I have to do for that one. Now, in our last example here, what we're going to do is we're going to give you the fact that lines P and Q are indeed parallel. And if they are parallel, that gives us a whole bunch of information about what these angles can be. Now, they only give me two values for the angles. So when they do this, go ahead and label your diagram with those angle degree measures first. So I know angle 1 is 78 degrees, and I know that angle 2 is 47 degrees. So now that I've got that, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to try to fill these in right away. What I want to do is I want to fill the diagram in first. When you fill the diagram in first, it makes it so much easier to just list out your answers then. So let's go ahead and start off. Let's start off down here. And the reason why we're starting off down here is because hopefully you notice these two lines are parallel, right? We were told that. And I have two different transversals. So when you have two different transversals, you actually have to work on one transversal at a time. So we're going to work on this transversal down here first. So if we're working with this transversal first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out what the missing angles are. Now, if I take a look at angle 3, maybe I want to find that angle first. I notice angle 1 and angle 3, they form a linear pair. So they should be supplementary, so they should add up to 180. So what plus 78 gives me 180? That would be 102. Now that I've got that, I can also ask you about angle 4. Angle 4 and angle 1, if you notice, they form the same side C's. Same side C's, if lines are parallel, are supplementary. So what should angle 4 be then? Well, they have to add up to 180, so this is going to be 102 also. Next, if we're taking a look at angle 5, you can either do the linear pair with angle 4 and angle 5, or you can realize that angle 1 and angle 5 form corresponding angles, the letter F. So corresponding angles with lines that are parallel are congruent. So angle 5 would also be 78 degrees. I filled in the bottom transversal. How about you try to fill in the top transversal on your own? Pause the video and come back and we'll see if we have the same numbers. So I filled in my diagram and I started off with this angle 2 over here. and it was 47 that was given to us, and I realized that angles 2 and 7 were vertical, so they would be the same exact measurement. Next thing, 2 and 6 form a linear pair, therefore they are supplementary, so I knew that the angle 6 had to be 133 degrees. Now, I noticed angle 2 and angle 8, they made the letter Z, and remember, Z's are alternate interior angles. So alternate interior with lines that are parallel, we said were congruent. So angle 8 and angle 2 would have to be the same measurement, meaning angle 8 would be 47. And for angle 9, either you could do the linear pair for 8 and 9, or you could realize that angle 6 and angle 9 are alternate exterior angles. They make the letter V, so they should be the same exact measurement. Now, what do I notice? I notice that I'm not moving in between. I'm not comparing, say, angle 9 to angle 3. You might think they're corresponding angles. Well, here's the issue. You're using two different transversals with the parallel lines. Therefore, we're not jumping from transversal to transversal. Keep it to the same transversal. Okay, so that's why, if you're looking at this, if you're finding out what angle 9 is, you'd either have to use a linear pair or you'd have to use this pair of alternate exterior angles with 9 and 6, not down here at all inside. So then all you have to do is go ahead and list your values out. So angle 3 was 102, angle 4 was 102, angle 5 was 78 degrees, angle 6 was 133, angle 7 was 47, angle 8 was 47, and angle 9 was 133. Make sure you do your whisk, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.